Welcome, Patricia Clason, to Ordinary Visionaries. So great to have you here. So,
Thank you.
Patricia, you really have an interesting background. You've done some really interesting things that we're going to talk about today. So, tell me, how are you an ordinary visionary?
I think it fits in the area of I wanted to do something that could make a difference for people to have better lives. Like from the time I was in high school. In high school, I used to say I'm going to teach the teachers. I had no idea what that meant when I said it, but that's what I used to say. And here I am today training people to go out and teach other people in many different ways, from personal growth work to
Yeah.
corporate work. And so I somehow knew that what I needed to do was to find a way to give people good learning opportunities.
Right.
So that's what it's been about. No matter what I'm doing, it's been about how do I make it possible for the everyday person to be able to learn X, whatever that is, whether that's healing trauma or running your business or emotional intelligence.
So, you've had a sense of that since you were, a teenager or even before
hmm
that?
No, I don't think before that. It was definitely in high school. And playfully, I'll say that I think part of what solidified that is I had a few really not good teachers
I
in
can
high
relate.
school. And it's like, no, 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 we're not learning anything here. And the best teachers were the ones who engaged me as a person
Yeah.
and who saw what I was interested in and encouraged me to follow that and figure that out for myself. And so that was another big part of that path.
Yeah, great. I remember when I was young, I had the sense that I would be working with people and helping them in some way. And, I had that vision from very, very, very early on. So I can relate.
Okay.
So what was your work or career trajectory? Did you go to college? What did you do first?
I went to college for a while with a major in communications. I knew it would be about writing or journalism or something of that nature. But I left school because of a physical injury that kept me from getting around campus and just never went back.
Oh, wow.
And then just started finding ways for me to be talking with other people to help them learn about things. And in the beginning, that was with Tai Chi. I studied Tai Chi with Fred Lehrman, and he encouraged me to look at other opportunities of personal growth and development where I could be sharing what I knew and what skills I had with other people. So I started doing workshops for people, never really thinking that that was going to be my
Yeah.
life. Um,
Little
but
did you know.
that's what it is now. I do weekend intensives for trauma survivors and veterans. I do teaching in emotional intelligence and communications and leadership and soft skills in the university system. I teach trauma counseling. They're all situations where I'm teaching people how to go out and make their lives better, but also to help other people, to be of service.
Right. So I assume you got training in some of these things. You got training in Tai Chi. You got training in nonviolent communication or whatever. I mean, there's so many different.
How did you know it was Marshall's work that was so important? Yes, and nonviolent communication, as well as many other things. I didn't do the college degree thing, but I think if you put together every weekend I went to and every class I took and all the books I read, we'd have a couple of PhDs.
Yeah, sounds like me. So yeah, yeah, I totally relate to that. So, I remember my very first workshop. I mentioned it in the interview that I did with
hmm
Patrick. My very first workshop was called Dreams into Reality, and it was stuff that I'd learned over years. And I had, I don't know, half a dozen, 8 or 9 people in this course, and et cetera, et cetera. So, what was the very first course you remember doing other than Tai Chi?
Oh my goodness. Gosh, I don't know that I could answer that question easily. There were there were a lot of different workshops. I know that we did something called a 1-year seminar where people would come once a month over the course of a year, and every month there was a different topic. So there was like money and prosperity and relationships and creativity and um, health and well-being, all the
Oh,
fundamentals of living a good life.
right,
And
right.
that has evolved over the years into a program I've produced over the last few years called the Successful Living Basic Training, where they can now stream it. They don't have to be here to be in a workshop.
That's great. So, how many people were in that course, more or less?
That
That,
original 1-year seminar, I
yeah,
think there were about 30, 35 people in that class.
right. So that's pretty good. How did you find these people? How did you sign them up? What was your secret whatever to
Secret
doing that?
ingredient.
Yeah,
Two things. One was referrals from my Tai Chi instructor, who thought that these people could really use what I had to offer,
yeah,
and my own enthusiasm about it, that I was just so excited about things that I had learned that I wanted to share with people. So I made a lot of one-on-one contacts. In the beginning, it wasn't, you teach about marketing and have wonderful things that you shared with us all. It wasn't a flyer kind of trying to get people to come. It was definitely person to person.
yeah. Well, often that's the best way. Hey, I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing this new thing. I'm excited about it. Can I talk to you about it? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Something like
yeah.
that, right? And you have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation. You say I don't know exactly what you said, but you had a conversation, which is kind of the ultimate marketing for something like this. It's the personal connection and the personal trust. And I love that year-long programs. And you give them homework and give them assignments, and they take things on and they do work in between, and then you do something else. And so, how long? Excuse me. So
Mm-hmm.
that program kind of evolved over time, and you did it for how long?
I think there was a period of maybe 5, 7 years or so where we were actually doing that program. And
Right.
then I started branching off into doing other things. Because one of the things I learned early on is that personal growth was not a mega dollar industry. And it wasn't back then. I mean, there wasn't a Tony Robbins and there wasn't, the mega industry that personal growth is today.
Yeah.
And so I started to balance that with taking my insights into the corporate world and offering them in a way that corporate people could hear what was possible without it being too, I guess the word I would use is airy fairy, like out there ideas. Because,
Woo woo and airy fairy, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, we got to get more woo woo airy fairy stuff into companies, but we have to present it in a way that is
Yes.
the soft skills, the communication skills, the getting along skills, the
Hmm.
cooperation skill, all that stuff, right?
And all of that is becoming more and more important. And I think the popularity of emotional intelligence as that field has grown.
Yeah,
And also the whole idea of coaching in the business world, that people are being coached to be better individuals in their work, not
yeah,
being trained to do a job, but being coached to be better people in their work,
yeah.
that those two things together are making a huge difference.
Do you remember back to your first few workshops or programs that you did in a company? Can you think of any of those?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
You're going
Yeah.
back 20, 30 years, right? Or however long.
Well, that would have been almost 40 years ago.
Right.
And so that's why sometimes it's hard to remember the specifics of it all.
Sure, sure,
Um, but what I do remember is that what got me into the businesses was talking about time and stress management. That even way back then, that was something that almost every organization was interested in. And
sure.
so if I could share with them ways to take more control or more better management of their time and how to take care of themselves so that they weren't stressed out, those were two topics almost every organization wanted.
Right. Is that
So that's
still true? Is that still true now, or have things sort of morphed into a different? I mean, now we have virtual teams after the pandemic and people working from their homes, and things have changed a lot.
It has changed a lot. I don't think the need for time mastery and stress management and emotional intelligence, I don't think any of that has changed. I actually think it's gotten to be more important, but in a different way.
Right, right,
Working from home, solo, virtual, requires a whole different mindset in terms of making sure I get to that computer every day to, do it and not get hung up in the television show or whatever, and so
right, right.
it's a whole different world, but the core concepts are the same.
Yeah. So over the years, what I found in my business is that certain principles were kind of repeating things in the same way that yours was are repeating concepts. And so I'm assumed those things are still there in the foundation of what you do. So
Absolutely.
so I'd like to get into a little bit more depth, a little bit more, you know, not just here's what I did, but how you did these things. So I don't know, we could pick anything or I could pick something. So let's talk about stress. So
Well, before we go there, if we can,
yeah,
in relationship to the direction you were going, this is where Tai Chi was a big part of my process. In that, in Tai Chi, when we practice principles, 5 core principles in Tai Chi. One of them is called Fair Lady's Wrist, which is when your hand is fully relaxed and open, um, and to be able to be that way in your whole body. And when I started teaching time management and the stress management, what I did is instead of giving people tips, because I could give them a list of here's 150 ways to manage your time, and maybe 5 would apply
exactly.
to a specific person.
Right, right,
So instead, what I started doing in everything now that I do is I teach the principles. In time management, it's responsibility, completion, and planning are the 3 core principles. In stress management, it's about paying attention to your thoughts and paying attention to your emotion and listening to what is happening so that you can direct it in a healthy and constructive way. So
right.
if you change your thoughts, a situation isn't stressful unless the way you think about it is stressful.
No kidding. Yes.
So that's the principle there, and then the principle
People
about the
don't think
body.
about it that way, do they, though?
No,
People think they're doing it to me. That situation is doing it to me,
right.
as opposed to it's how I'm coming to it is making me
Mm-hmm.
stressed. My thoughts, my beliefs, my emotional triggers. Yeah.
And if we look at yoga, we look at Zen, we look at Buddhism, and even in some of the Christian denominations and teachings, there are those key principles that are throughout all of them. Be still and know that I am God. That's about quiet.
Right. Present.
Connect with your spirit, with yourself.
Yeah.
It's all over, but we don't think about it that way.
So, I've followed teachings like that, and along with business, I was always interested in personal growth and spirituality and all of those kinds of things. Um, the concepts in so many ways are so simple, but they're not so easy to practice necessarily because we have this wonderful thing called the mind. So I'm
Right.
interested to know. I dealt with clients that were struggling with things, struggling to get out there, fears and worries about being out there, stuff like that. So I tried to, I did a lot of reading and study and try to find any tools I could possibly get because it wasn't, here's just a marketing technique. I could give you a marketing technique and then you'd never apply it because you were afraid you'd get rejected or you'd make you look like a fool. And I'm interested, you know, how you conveyed these principles in a way that went thunk for people, that they had ahas and they started, what kind of things would you do to really help people, transform?
Well, one of the key things is encouraging them to sort of download that conversation that's constantly going on in here and take a look at what that conversation is actually saying instead of just having it happen here. By writing it down and seeing it, it becomes much more obvious what's happening in their heads. And so they're more likely to go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I spent so much time thinking negatively, or I spent so much time worrying, or all those kinds of things. And then having them take the thoughts that were in all that writing, the sort of spontaneous writing that they would do, and then start taking those thoughts and slowly shifting them. Not big extreme shifts. I am now a millionaire. But I enjoy my work.
Millionaires are nothing these days.
Well, 40 years ago, you're asking me what I used to do.
Only kidding. Only kidding. Right. Billionaire.
So the idea of like what is your next step in making a change, and having people take those steps and build on those steps. Because my observation about a whole lot of people in the world is they wanted the big thing. In the interview that I listened to you do just recently,
Yeah.
one of you said something about the kids these days want, the big office and the big bucks and all that stuff, and they want it instantly.
Right.
And they don't realize that there's a building to building your life, a process to building your life that has to go in steps. Because if we gave them the corner office and the big bucks, they'd mess it up pretty quickly because
Yeah.
they weren't really emotionally mature enough or prepared enough to
Sure.
do the work.
Sure.
And part of that is why I call the class Successful Living Basic Training, is because what I learned from 30 years of working with veterans and the military is that basic training was absolutely necessary for them to be able to serve in the military. And basic training coming back was absolutely necessary for them to transition back into a civilian life.
Right. Do
And
they
yet
have
we don't.
that for people that get out of the service?
Say again, please.
Is that a service or is that a program that military vets have available to them when they get out of the military?
They're getting that more and more. For a
Yeah.
long, long time, they didn't have that. Then they had, we playfully call it death by PowerPoint, a 2-hour presentation when they came home, and then, you're on your own. But
Basically useless. Yeah.
now there are some very good programs that are gaining good ground in terms of making a difference in that transition.
Interesting. My father was a career Air Force officer.
Okay.
Went through World War II, but then
Yeah.
continued for into the 60s
Mm-hmm.
as an Air Force officer. So that's a little bit different than, being shipped off overseas to combat. It's a very different kind of thing. But
It
yeah,
was still service, and it still has all of its stressors
yes,
and a different culture. It's different than our everyday culture.
yeah, very interesting. So, so one of the key things you said that I really liked is getting it out of your head, down on paper to see how what are you thinking about this? What are you saying to yourself about this? What are you believing about this? And then what do you say? Slowly shifting that to something that's more realistic or possible or real, right?
Yes, yes. Finding what is the next step that I can believe and I can actually work with.
Yeah,
Part of the thing about what we called affirmations, and I think that term is still used a lot, is that people would make outrageous statements or outrageous affirmations, like I playfully said, "I am now a millionaire," and the mind goes, "You're crazy. That's not going to happen. It's not true. Look at your bank balance, blah 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 blah," and then all that negative self talk begins again. Where if I said, I enjoy my job, or I am going to create a job I can enjoy as a next step, there's that possibility. And then when I'm enjoying what I'm doing, then I start to get creative, and I can either expand my career, or maybe I start my own business, or I invent something or whatever. But because I'm in that more satisfied, joyous place, I
yeah,
can in fact do a whole lot more than when I'm in that negative self-talk place.
Right. Well, we get stuck, don't we? We get stuck in old patterns, old destructive patterns. We get into a relationship where there's a lot of conflict and we don't know how to get out of it. And I mean, it's kind of endless, right?
Well, from an emotional intelligence standpoint, I would tell you that we have these neural pathways in our brains that say that this is the way you do life. And this is my little connection of neurons here.
Right.
And so we just go down that path because that's what we learned about how it's supposed to be or what kind of emotional state we're supposed to have. And so as we have that, until we can hook up an option to do it differently, we will continue to go down the path. People would rather travel a known hell than face an unknown heaven because the
That is
unknown
a
is
great
scary.
quote. I don't think I've ever heard that quote before.
Feel free to steal it.
We would rather travel a known hell than an unknown heaven. So this unknown, yeah, it's I'd rather be uncomfortable or
I'd rather have
in
a
my
known,
discomfort. Yeah.
it's a known discomfort. I'd rather have the known discomfort than the unknown of, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. How am I going to figure it out? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. See, I'm so interested with this whole exploration with ordinary visionaries of how we envision the next thing for ourselves and move naturally into that. And because that's a process that I've done so many times. And and tell me, I'll give you some ideas, but what I see a lot of people do is try to force a goal. This is something I want. This is something I want to go. And the mind is not quite ready to go there. But I can kind of feel it, but then I'm just sort of struggling to get there. And, something that I do is I'm thinking about it, almost dreaming it.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of, just letting it sort of come. And then I find myself writing something about it. And then it's just becoming clearer. And it's sort of like, I'm not even doing that. It's just sort of happening. And I'm sort of letting it evolve and grow. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, there is an obvious action that I can take for the next step. So like one day you said, well, maybe I should put together a workshop. And then,
Mm-hmm.
this came and that came. One of the things you talked about, which I regret for myself, is I didn't do something like Tai Chi.
Mm.
Because that kind of mindset or thinking is kind of embodied in, because Tai Chi is very slow, deliberate movements,
Yes.
I just love watching the movements of Tai Chi. And you can't force it,
Right.
but,
You can't.
and you can't do it perfectly. You can just do the movement, and there's the slowness and the awareness. And that must have given you a great foundation.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful foundation. It was a foundation of practice.
Yeah.
My Tai Chi teacher often said, practice, practice, practice. He always said it 3 times. So it was the idea of practice. It was the idea of the principles, not struggling to, do I have my hand perfectly? Am I making this kick right? Am I moving this way perfectly? But just moving into it. And allowing it to evolve in itself. And the more I practiced and stayed focused on the principles, the better my form became, the better my practice became, the more peaceful my mind became. All of those things started falling into place. And it's a meditation of sorts. And there's so much research now in neuroscience about the value and the importance of meditation.
Yes. Do you still do Tai Chi?
No, I don't. I don't practice my form on a daily basis anymore.
No.
However, I can tell you that there have been many a time where I've done a movement that's like, oh, that was Tai Chi. When I moved a particular way to pick something up, or I I fell, but didn't really fall, didn't finish falling because I went into
Sure.
awareness of my body and what I needed to do. And I go, oh, yep, that's my Tai Chi. So 10 years of practice deeply ingrained it in my system. So
Yeah.
while I don't do the form, it's there.
Yeah. I found that so many things that I've learned, so many philosophy, psychology, spiritual teachings, I wasn't exactly the quickest study in the world. I think I'm a fairly smart person, but a lot of resistance. But those, after a while, those things that you've practiced over and over, like just being present in the moment, quiet in the moment, the best you can be,
Mm-hmm.
just here I am. Okay, what's next? As opposed, and so instead of getting stressed, I mean, it just doesn't happen so much anymore.
When we get to that place you were just describing, then we see and hear the thoughts that are the creative thoughts.
Yes.
It's when we get stressed that we fill our minds with, I can't, I won't, I'm going to be late, this isn't going to work, blah, 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 all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's no room in that crowded space to hear the thought that says, well, just make a phone call and tell them that you're going to be late and it's all going to be just fine.
Yes. I suppose, oh, I'm going to be late and they'll think I'm the all that kind of crap that goes on,
Mm-hmm.
and so leads to a lot of stress. Yeah. And yeah, so that's kind of my main thing, is just to try to be present in the moment, and not try so much, but just to, here's the present moment. It's not very effortful, really.
That's true.
Yeah.
So when I was listening to you in your other interview and thinking about the idea of an ordinary visionary, what came to mind, what I wrote down was that, I want to make sure that I say this right, that what I chose to do even way back in the beginning of Teach the Teachers was about helping people to see possibilities, not have-dos, not goals, not whatever, but to help people to see possibilities and
Yeah.
then help them to see the steps to make them real.
Yeah. Talk more about that, of what that kind of looks like. Because when you say that to people, possibilities, and do you start to evoke ideas from them, like what's a possibility for you that isn't real right now, or that you would like, something you'd like to have in your future that's not quite there yet, that kind of thing?
It's those things for sure, but it's also when I ask people what they want to have different about their lives,
Yeah.
they will say to me, "Well, I don't want to be angry anymore." And I
Right.
said, "No, no, no. You're telling me what you don't want.
Yeah. Right.
What is it that you want?" "Well, I don't know. I just don't want to be angry." Well, to know that you don't want to be angry, you also have to have an idea of what else might be there. So what
Yes.
else might be there? What would you be doing differently if you weren't angry anymore? And they'll go, oh, well, I guess I'd spend more time talking to my life partner. Wonderful. So what would that look like? How would you do that? And taking them just to that next step of this is what not angry would look like, communication.
Yes.
So I do encourage people to build castles when they're ready, when they're free enough from that negativity that they can have that creativity. Build the castle, like Thoreau said. Build your castles. Now put the foundation under them. And that foundation is that one step at a time.
So the castle is like the big imagination, the big possibility, a wonderful, incredible, perfect relationship, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
But what's the first step? To have
Right.
good conversations with my partner, share this with my partner.
Mm-hmm.
I found that in, doing ordinary visionaries, everything I've done, you can only see so far ahead. Maybe you can see a big vague picture that sort of glows in the distance, but in terms of what you'll actually do, sometimes that can't be a year ahead. Sometimes it can only be a week ahead.
Sometimes
I
one day at a time.
one day at a time. So I think, well, what's the next email that I'll send to people to invite them to be ordinary visionaries? And I've just been thinking of that for a day or two, and I just wrote it just before our interview.
Oh, good.
It was just sort of there in my mind. So, well, I
Hmm.
got 10 minutes, and I just wrote it, and then that's clear, and then I'll clarify that a bit more, and I'll send it out, and then um, can you speak to people try stuff? They have a vision. They try stuff. They have a goal. They're trying to produce a result, whatever the heck it is, and it falls flat.
Hmm.
It's a big. It's it, just it just doesn't work. And I've seen a lot of people that happens. Well, they just give up. They just like, well, I'll never be able to be whatever. I'll never be this. I'll never get that. Whatever. But that's just a natural thing. It's just, well, you try something, it ain't always going to work. Why?
Right. Well, I think I use the analogy of a baby learning to walk.
Yes, me too.
So the baby sees this adult walking around and goes, "Oh my goodness, that looks so cool. I want to do that." Right? And so they start figuring little pieces out, some muscle mastery, and then how to pull themselves up and then how to stand up. And a baby falls on its tush
Million times.
probably a million times or more before they actually master that walking process.
Right,
And they
right.
can't run before they walk, and they can't walk before they crawl. A very few do, but almost all children will learn to crawl because they need that right, left kind of movement and awareness in the body to have that become subconscious.
Sure.
Um, so it's a staged process. And the baby holds that idea of, I want to do what that big person is doing. I want to move like that and go where I want to go by myself.
Yeah.
But they have to do it in baby steps, whatever those look like along the way.
But the thing is, some people seem naturally predisposed to be successful. They do this thing and then they do that thing. And of course, the environment, the school they went to, the teachers they had, what their parents said, all of that makes a difference. Just gentle encouragement. And when it didn't work, you find the next step. So, but a lot of people grew up in environments that were not supportive, that were abusive in some cases,
That's right.
traumatic, whatever. They were punished for not being successful. They were yelled at when they got a B on their report card instead of an A. And I don't know, have you worked with people that have gone through that kind of thing that really find it difficult to realize that want because they have so much stuff, so trauma, whatever, that kind of thought. How do you work with people like that?
Well, part of it is working with the body and the body memory,
Yeah.
what's called the somatic memory, where all of that beat down, let's call it, is stored there, and that somehow needs to be released. And there are lots of different ways that can happen
Mm.
in the world today. And then the other part of it is that the next step after that baby is starting to move enough and start to do some things on its own is the baby needs social persuasion. The baby needs people around to say, you can do this. I know you can do it. Come on,
Yes.
and get the baby to move forward. And that's true even as an adult. If we haven't had that kind of support, we
Yeah.
need someone to hold the picture and the vision of who we are and what we can do for us until we can begin to believe it.
Yeah.
And if that social persuasion isn't there, if there's not that one teacher, that one leader, that one friend who says, wait a minute, I think you can pull out of this, sometimes people don't, sadly. But
Yeah.
they do have to have that. They do have to have someone helping them to believe and to integrate that. And then taking the different successes that they have had, even looking sometimes at successes that we might call dysfunctional. I have a friend who wrote a book called How to Be a Successful Criminal. And part of the book is where he says, if you're really going to be a criminal, be prepared, because the high probability is at some point it's all going to fall down and you're going to suffer terribly because of the way that you're choosing to do life. And you could take all that and put it in this other direction and have a successful life.
Yeah, that's a very attention-getting topic. The person that I'm interviewing tomorrow, he wrote a book called I'm blanking out on it. How businesses commit suicide.
Mm.
So it's kind of like, the destructive things that we do. There's someone in our community that I've been helping a little bit. He's a homeless person.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 42 or so. He's been homeless his whole life.
Oh,
went into the Army, or Marines, was discharged, wasn't successful, and has been homeless ever since. And, he's had a lot of drug problems and this, that, and the other thing. And, and I have him work for me, and he helps out in our yard and stuff like that. And he's actually a very hard worker.
Mm-hmm.
And yet sometimes he does stuff that's like, what the hell, did he do that for? And he's well-intentioned, but, he's sort of, in terms of success, he hasn't really managed success. He doesn't have a cell phone. He doesn't have a watch. He doesn't have a bank account. He doesn't have anything.
But does that really mean success would be my question. I mean, he has managed, if he's, from what you're saying, I'm imagining he's probably somewhere in his 30s or 40s.
Yeah, he's in 42.
Okay, so he has successfully navigated the extremely rough road of homelessness.
Yes.
And lack of training, mental training, understanding, whatever, to do it differently. He has managed to navigate and survive all that time.
Yes. Yes.
And so I would just look at what are the things you did in order to survive, which ones served you and which ones got you in trouble. Let's look at some of the ones that served you. Do you want life to be different?
Yeah.
He may not want life to be different.
Yeah. I am just learning to be patient with him and kind to him, and he's always really cheerful and works very hard in so many ways. So he's some people just don't want to get out of there. They've given up, basically. It's sort of like, well, they've gotten on food stamps and they sleep under a bridge. They're on drugs. God bless them. They're stuck in that. And he's trying to get out of it, but we'll see where it goes.
It'll be a slow process, and let me tell you, having known many, many, many Marines, that part of that training is going to be some of the most difficult for him to overcome.
Right. Yeah.
So I wish him well, and I think if you keep offering him your heart, which is what I hear you saying, you keep offering him your heart, he gets to experience, I am valuable, I am contributing, I do matter, and he begins to have those feelings. Those can continue to grow, and giving him other opportunities and places where that can grow. And allow that to organically begin to fill who he is. I think that might help with his transition to whatever differences he would like to have in his life.
Yeah, I wish the best for him.
Yeah.
But you got to be patient.
Yes, sir. You do.
Yeah. So in the thing that you filled out before this, I just want.
I don't remember what I said.
Well, I have it right here. So,
tell me.
I've spent most of my life volunteering, from 10 to of my time 50 years ago to approximately 75% of my time today.
Yes.
It's always been important for me to give back. I'm grateful I had a vocation that paid well and allowed me to spend so much of my time giving back. So not only do you help people through your vocation, through these classes and corporate work, et cetera, so as well, what kind of volunteer work have you done, and how has that enriched you?
Well, I created a program called Healing Warrior Hearts, which is a weekend retreat for veterans.
Ah,
It started with the name Bamboo Bridge back in 1993. So we're celebrating our 31st anniversary this year.
wow.
And that program has evolved over the years from the Vietnam vets to all vets now and different eras and times of service. And I lead those retreats. I don't get paid to lead the retreats. I'm training other people to lead the retreats. I don't get paid by them for their training, and they're doing it because they're willing to volunteer and give forward, give back, whichever way you prefer to look at it. Some people call it pay it forward. Some people call give it back.
Right.
Um, but to contribute in gratitude for what they have received and for the country that they live in and all of that. And so right now I do 10 retreats a year for Healing Warrior Hearts. And many of them come back and continue to volunteer and to guide other veterans through the program. And so that we also count them. And if we were to count them, the numbers would be in multiple thousands.
Wow.
And then we have a program called Taking It Lightly, which is for civilians, non-military, although military can attend it as well, but its focus isn't military. Its focus is personal, emotional issues and trauma. And so we've been doing that since 1983, and we've had over 4,000 people come through that program.
Wow.
And then the other big thing that I do is a fair called the Dare to Be Aware Fair here in Milwaukee. I've been doing it for 16 years, and close to 1,000 people will come through an event with 100 different vendors who are all personal growth, wellness kinds of things. That's where the Dare to Be Aware thing comes from. So we've had thousands come through that experience as well.
Fantastic. You really are an ordinary visionary, maybe an extraordinary visionary.
I don't know about that. I appreciate the thought, though. Thank you very much. I just love doing what I do, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it if I wasn't enjoying it. And as you read what I wrote, I am very blessed that that turn that I made way back when to try and bring the corporate money in so that I could continue the personal growth work, that was a
Yeah.
wise move, as it turns out, because I
Yeah.
was good at what I did and I get paid well for it. And that allows me to then spend 10 weekends a year at Healing Warrior Hearts and 4 weekends a year at Taking It Lightly and one
Wow.
great big event called the Dare to Be Aware Fair and whatever else I do.
Wow. That's amazing. How did why did you get interested in helping vets? What was your connection there?
My father was a World War II veteran.
Like
He
mine.
U.S. Army, yes. My dad was U.S. Army medic, Silver Star, Bronze Star, other awards. And he came home with his version of PTSD. And he stayed in the military, in the reserves for his 20 years. And so that was a big part of our lives um, as I was growing up, from going to the cemetery on Memorial Day to honor the veterans and, lots of different things like that. That was a big part of my life. And so I had that in my background. And when a Vietnam vet came to me and said, I have this stuff about Vietnam, this emotional baggage I'm carrying, which many Vietnam veterans have,
Yeah.
can Taking It Lightly help me? And I said, yes, I think it can. And he went through the program and he said, let's create a program like this for the vets. So I said, all right, let's do it. And that's how the Bamboo Bridge was born. And that speaks to part of what we've been having in this whole conversation of I was doing what my heart wanted to do, what I believed in, what I thought could be valuable. And the opportunity showed up for something else to happen. I didn't one day say, I want to go do something for veterans.
Right.
But when it showed up, it was obvious that it was the right way to go.
Yeah, that's great. So he had veteran friends, I assume, and
Mm-hmm.
you talked and you
And we
figured
built
out
the
what to
program.
do. And what is that? Is it a weekend program?
It's a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. It's
Okay,
like a short retreat.
right. And do you do it at a hotel or you go to an offsite kind of place or
We do it in Milwaukee and we do it in Houston, Texas.
yeah,
And in Houston, we're at a place called the Brookwood Community, which is this beautiful 140 acres of land and space and beauty. And here in Milwaukee, we actually do it closer to the city, near the Milwaukee Zoo. And we have the one floor of office building. It's actually the lower level so that we don't disrupt anybody with any noise that we might make.
right,
And that's where we do the retreats. And in both cases, the vets stay at a nearby hotel for the weekend.
great. So anybody listening to this and you're interested in maybe taking this on in your community, call Patricia. Do you have any system to train people to lead these programs?
We do. It's an apprenticeship type process
Right,
where they
right.
come and they staff and they learn the skills, and I train them and help them build their skills.
Wow. And so
And
you're
we're looking
so
for instructors as well as participants. Yes.
right. And it's 100% nonprofit. Do the veterans pay a little bit for it to cover
No,
overhead expenses?
no, they do not. They
Do the
serve.
donations come in from some place to
Yes.
help it? Yeah.
We have some very good donors and a lot of individuals who give us money on a regular basis. So it's 95% of all the money that comes through the organization is spent on the retreats and the veterans. There are no salaries. It's a totally volunteer organization.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Thank
So
you.
just I I just like to know a little bit more about that because you have your everyday average human being that has gone through childhood trauma and disappointment and God knows what else. And everybody needs healing. Everybody needs waking up to some degree. But we, if we haven't been in the military, it's sometimes hard for us to imagine what uh, uh, seeing death and destruction in its many forms can how that can impact you. And so, what kind of transformation takes place in that weekend, and what new possibility opens up for people after they've done this program?
Well, I'm going to speak a little bit first to your first part of your comment, which is that it is important that every retreat has both veterans and civilians,
Uh
because
huh.
the veterans need to know that the community accepts who they are and what they've done and how they've served. And they
Right.
need to know that they're appreciated by that community.
Right.
So there are both in the program. And the biggest change that happens during the course of a retreat is that sense of unconditional regard and acceptance that they experience, and appreciation, gratitude. And it happens for everybody in a different way. Sometimes people are doing things that we might call psychodrama. Other times people are just simply sharing their story, that they've never had the safety before to be able to say, this is what I experienced. So it's a wide range of doing that happens. For every person is very different, but it begins with creating safety. People get to do the work that they each need to do in the supportive community of other veterans and civilians. And then we call it future pacing, that what am I going to do with this? How am I going to take it out in the world? And for veterans in particular, what's my next mission?
Mm.
Because when you're trained in the military, you're trained mission first.
Mm.
And when a person leaves the military and they have no mission,
Yeah.
whether it's purpose, as you've talked about purpose, or it's that they want to go out and give back to their fellow veterans or do something for the community. But they need to feel valuable, and they need to have a focus, a mission. And
Yeah.
so we help them find that mission, whether it's continuing to work with us or doing other projects. We've had people who've come through our program who've created other nonprofits and done some amazing and wonderful things out in the world. But they need to know that there's people behind them and that they have that support. In the military, the phrase is often used, got your six. So 12 o'clock on the clock is ahead of you, six is your back.
Yeah.
And so got your six is I've got your back, I'm behind you, I'm supporting you. We talk about we've got your 360. We're working with you all the way around. We've got your back, but we're also walking forward with you.
I love those. People can get that right away, right? Yeah. Very powerful. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for the work you do
You're very welcome.
and the difference that you've made.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being interviewed today. It was really delightful. And your clarity, your simplicity. I loved your initial vision as a high school student, and what a life that you've had, making a difference with people. And yet it's never ending, isn't it? Growth is never ending.
Yes.
There's always difficulties. There's always challenges. There's always new opportunities for whatever.
And that's life. And if I take it one step at a time and just keep holding that picture, that vision, as we've talked about, helping hearts to heal, it'll happen.
As I like to say sometimes, fan-friggin-tastic.
Thank you. Yes, I can go there with that.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you for taking the time out to do this interview with me. It was really great.
Thank you. It was an honor to spend some time with you and to get to have this conversation. And before I sign off, thank you for all the things I've learned from you over the years, because I've been listening to your podcast and reading your emails and taking a few of your courses for a long time now. So
well,
thank you.
I'm glad that that's helped you be successful with what you're doing. You know, that was my life's work, to help people make a difference through their work. So,
well, you did it.
Yeah. Wow.
Take good care, Robert. Thank you.